morning and welcome to the Fusionary Health Podcast. I am Dr. Shivani Gupta, and this is the podcast dedicated to recalibrating your health every day. My goal is to help you wake up each day energized by addressing root causes and giving you new approaches to preventive health. The more we know about integrative health, the more empowered we are in building the vibrant health that we want. So today, I'm excited to share with you my guest, Dr. Jillian Duquette. She is a chiropractic physician here in South Florida. I've been to her office. It's right in Coral Springs, Margate area. And I can't wait to interview her because when I met her, she had some interesting stories to share. She had some interesting, I'll let us get started and you'll see what I mean. I instantly fell in love with her and was like, yes, we are so aligned in so many ways. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to do my very first podcast. So if I do weird things, it's because of that.
Yeah, you know what? It's always fun to get started in these things because then you realize how good you are at it.
I feel like I've seen all of the ones that you've posted so far and you are a natural.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. So share with us today, what got you into chiropractic medicine? What got you into what you do today? And what kind of things you use in your practice for your patients? Because one of my goals is really to show everyone that, you know, people make these assumptions. Doctors are doctors. All chiropractors are chiropractors. Who knows what on earth Ayurveda is? And my goal is to just illuminate that there's so many different textures and layers and aspects in each and every one of the integrative professions and the allopathic ones as well. And so if we just understood the practitioner, we can find the right one for us on our health journey to get us where we want to go.
I love that because there is so many stereotypes of chiropractors, even medical doctors. And there's been medical doctors that I worked with personally that are not the mold, not like I go see an orthopedic surgeon, you need to have surgery. It's not always like that. And it's the same thing with chiropractors. People can come into my office and not need to get an adjustment.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why I'm like that. I decided to become a chiropractor because I was actually on my way to go to vet school. I was accepted. I was working at a vet hospital until I was leaving, but I hurt myself really bad. Like bending over to pick up a dog to restrain it for something I don't even remember at this point. I heard a pop and I couldn't move.
Wow.
It was awfully painful. My poor husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, I couldn't even lift my arms up to remove my clothes because it hurt so bad. So I was so grateful for him, and he's my husband now. That his father actually is a chiropractor, and he called his dad on speaker, and his dad gave me things to do without even touching me, without any medications, just different positions where I was able to move and breathe, which was great. So I love that I was able to not need medication because I have a lot of addiction and things like that in my family. So I try to avoid things like that.
Sure.
So I was able to help my back pain with just some simple exercises.
Nice.
And I decided to go to chiropractic school, and I went to Palmer, Florida a long time ago.
Just a few years ago.
It was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I realized, like you were saying, I did not realize the stereotype of chiropractors. And there were so many chiropractors in there that did not believe in not believe in exercise or nutrition. All they believed in was an adjustment cured it all.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? This is not for me. I'm very medically oriented.
Sure.
So going into a place where I can just put my hands on you and adjust you and all is well. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. If I go and eat McDonald's and then I get an adjustment, it doesn't cure the toxins I just put in my body.
Sure.
So I found, luckily, I'm very happy that I stayed with it. I love what I do. I found a bunch of different techniques. I was able to learn about soft tissue techniques, nutrition, inflammation, and in school. And now I've been able to apply it to my patients.
Awesome. That's a big deal. Yeah. It is interesting because I have, I will go into this, but I built a whole supplement company based on turmeric and I meet with so many different practitioners. And it's interesting to understand the style of each chiropractor and each practitioner who I meet. Mm-hmm. So you're right. I have seen that many people in the chiropractic field don't want to dive into nutrition and they don't want to dive into those kind of wellness topics. So there's more what I would call classic chiropractic. I just want to adjust. And then there's this open chiropractic who's like, well, I also better guide them on nutrition and inflammation or else we're not solving the problem. We're in a wheel.
The names for those are specific chiropractors.
Okay.
And evidence-informed chiropractors.
Really?
Yes, that's the inside scoop of what they call themselves.
I love learning new things. So which one is which? Specific is adjustment.
Yeah, just the adjustment. And I am more evidence-informed. So like I'm a part of a group, then we review, I can't use my words.
Charts?
Not charts, papers,
okay.
Like actual peer-reviewed papers
okay.
About what the best technique is and what exercises are good for that and things like that.
Awesome.
But anybody can benefit from nutrition.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So when it comes to your patients, what are the types of patients that you see? Who do you help the most? Can you share some of those stories around like what it is you offer that's different or that makes you a bit different? And then maybe some miracle stories as well. I always love getting into that topic.
Those are my favorite.
Yeah, because that illuminates
I have a very wide spectrum, which actually probably my two favorite patients. One of them is Medicare, not very active, but not like fitness. And then I have like fitness junkies.
Okay.
So my fitness junkies do really well when they come in, they get really nervous when they have a pain when they're working out.
Sure.
And they're like, oh my God, I can't do this. Like CrossFit people we're addicts. Yeah. I get it. You're like, oh God, that hurts. I'm not going to be able to ever do that again. Right. Fix me right now. But when I do the evaluation, I ended up finding that they have like a breathing pattern that's off and they're not breathing properly. So the way I describe it is if I had a can of like soda and I had a patient step on it, like a big dude. I actually had a patient today come in and he told me he was 320 pounds. He was a big guy, yeah, super muscular. And I was like, you can step on this can and you wouldn't break it. But if I pop the top, it's going to go everywhere. Sure. So that's what your core is. So if you're breathing and pressurizing that well, then there's so much more strength. All your joints will move properly because they're going off of a strong base, like a cannon or something. Like you can shoot a cannon off of a sidewalk and it would go far, but if you put it on a canoe, yes, the ball's not going to go very far. There's not going to be much force. Sure. So once I teach them that, then they have a better breathing pattern. Then they're able to lift without the discomfort anymore. Nice. So I had so many of those patients where I just give them breathing cues and then the pain is completely gone. Or wow. I give them home exercises to do before they
go to the gym.
Yeah. Like we were talking about phones and computers and stuff earlier.
Sure.
If a computer's not turning on in the right order, then like nothing works. Totally. So it's the same thing with your muscles. If they're not engaging in the right order, your discs are going to move kind of like this. Right. So it's going to irritate the joints, the nerves, the discs, everything. So if we can stabilize that, pressurize that core, then you can do anything.
That's awesome. And that has nothing to do with an adjustment.
Nothing. Well, if a joint's not moving well, it's not going to work either. Sure. So I do motion palpation where I feel all the joints and see what's not moving well, adjust them, and then give them the stability exercises, and then the muscles turn on. There's actually two types of muscles in the body. There's postural muscles and phasic muscles. So the postural ones are like the ones that are always tight. Sure. The traps, your erector muscles holding you upright. Yeah. Like those are working overtime because those phasic muscles, those deep muscles are not turning on like they should. Sure. So I put patients in, they're actually called developmental positions that your children hit as they grow. Like 7 out of 10 kids, they hit all these positions normally. They can walk, crawl, walk, and then they're fine. Sure. So I put patients in those positions and then I have them pressurize their core and I put resistance in different ways. It's a technique called dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. Nice. And it's been instrumental in my practice. Nice. That's a big deal because, even for me, I've had such a health history and it's why I teach what I teach. Right. That's how you learn from your own journeys. Yeah. Any of us who become obsessed with health, I find we had some health crisis and then we're so hyper-focused on our health. So we have long journeys of health crises one after another. But I remember I was a CrossFitter for a while and it was just too much for me. Yeah. Like for me, I think my frame has a hard time with going that heavy, but I do like to lift. And I find that my body stays more in shape and I feel stronger and I don't injure things and irritate things if I stay strong. And it takes having a strong core because I've thrown out my back before. And I asked them, what do I do? They said, well, don't go to the gym at physical therapy. And I was like, I feel like you're giving me the opposite of good advice. Yes. And so then I went and found a gym. It was here in Boca that really focuses on core strength and all those deep muscles. And as I've built them, I don't have neck pain. I don't have shoulder pain. I don't have all those things.
So yeah, I think we forget about the importance of even engaging those muscles. Like I catch a lot of times I'm just walking and I'm like, you could be engaging and walking. Like you
100%.
And
I tell patients to walk with a purpose.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't just walk as is, all slouched and whatever. And you're not even engaging your own core. And where is that hurting you? Is it your plantar fasciitis? Is it your knees? Like
absolutely.
What's taking a toll in your body for that lack of focusing on something?
Right. It's not just your back. Your core is like, it's everything.
Yeah.
It affects everything. It's actually, you talk about like your own personal health crises. That's how I found your product. I had a car accident over a year ago, numbness in my legs, awful. And I wasn't getting myself better. So like, I know what I need to do, but I'm like, this is not getting better. So I went to see another chiropractor and they did the DNS, the dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. And it was starting to get so much better. I was engaging all these deep muscles, but still wasn't there. And then I got onto the nutritional component and I started taking your anti-inflammatory formula. I'm like addicted. I'm switching to the turmeric because I'm not in that crisis mode anymore. So I'm really liking it so far.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's helped so much.
Awesome. I love hearing that. So when you have a patient and you are going to recommend nutrition, what do you normally think of as like the best patient to take inflammation relief or to take turmeric gold? Anybody. The inflammation relief.
Inflammation relief. I always say it bad, poorly. I usually recommend those for more acute people. And then the turmeric gold I would recommend for like just regular patients because everyone has inflammation in their life. And because of my crisis, I've gone a deep dive into nutrition and there's oil in everything. Like you like, oh, here, have a protein bar. I just got one for my daughter. It has palm oil in it. And I'm like, palm oil is bad. Any seed oil is not good for you except avocado.
Sure.
So it's in everything. So you have these little inflammatory triggers and that's just nutrition. You don't think about like stress and not sleeping well. Those are all things that just inflame your body. So whatever help you can do it.
You just said my favorite like sentence on earth. That's why my eyes are big. I'm like, yes, absolutely. Seed oils, so much of what we eat, so many processed ingredients. It's interesting. I was just at a supplier conference. I was in New Jersey this week and I met with hundreds of suppliers into my sector. And I remember passing the Xanthem gum booth and certain booths. And I was like, you are the gums that I avoid in all the foods that I buy, but you're here with a booth. And I thought, well, who am I to judge? It is an ingredient used in nutraceuticals. It's used in the foods that we eat nowadays. It must have some purpose, like shelf stability. I understand why people use it, but I think sometimes that the accumulation that our body is battling with when it comes to obesity, excess fat on the body, just the body's detoxification pathways being blocked up comes from these types of ingredients. So can we talk a little further on inflammation? Because like my favorite thing to hear about is a doctor's opinion of inflammation.
So I had this brilliant professor in chiropractic school who everyone thought he was crazy. He was like not a big adjuster, but he was all about nutrition. I actually didn't get to take him for nutrition, but I always saved this book. And my husband bought me a Kindle for my birthday. And I had the clip of his book on there. Like it just popped up from my Amazon account. I'm like, oh, let me read this. And I started reading it. And he talks about oils, like any kind of seed oil, flour, and sugar. Yep. And they're in absolutely everything. And it just like inflames your body. So I've been working on it. And I have to balance to not switch to the like having just corn.
Sure.
Because that like
has its own issues.
It has its own issues, which I'm dealing with now. I'm going through all my steps.
Yeah.
But it's in everything. It's scary when you have kids too, like everything that they eat.
I know. You look at it and you're like, I'm basically poisoning
I'm poisoning. Like I was like, oh.
It's all poisonous.
My daughter dives. And there was one time, poor baby, she got off the 3-meter dive and she was like crying. And I'm like, oh, did you get hurt? I'm like, are you upset? She's like, I'm just so hungry. I'm like, okay. Yeah. So I got her a bunch of protein bars and put them in her dive bag.
Sure.
And then I'm looking at them and I'm like, oh my God.
There's no perfect one.
There's nothing.
And then as parents, how do we constantly operationalize fresh food? Right. Like I literally think of it that way because my day runs from morning till night. And so sometimes it's like, get them to school. Okay, I went to work. I have to pack my lunch. Okay, around 3:00 in the afternoon, I have my tea time and a snack. I get the kids home, fuel them. They have activities. Okay, dinner. Okay, then we get to all go to bed and we start that over. But it's not easy to operationalize fruit and nuts and cheese and yogurt and foods that are fresh in their day. It's easier to say, here's some goldfish, take some cookies, whatever, peanut butter jelly. And so I go through seasons with that. I go through seasons where I'm like, we're going to eat organic and fresh. And then I go through seasons where I'm like, I just need to survive and get through. And that's it.
There's 100%. I totally agree with you. There's like times where I'm like, no, you can absolutely not have that bar. I'm like, go have a piece of fruit and some yogurt.
Right.
But then like you go with the prepackaged yogurt to make your life a little easier. And there's still.
I know. It's hard. I actually go to Sprouts and I usually go with my kids, which is hard because they go in two directions shopping for themselves and then I'm trying to keep track of them. But the other day I went myself and I took my time. Like I stood in the yogurt section and picked up label after label. And finally I was like, I don't know what to do. I think I should just make my own. Forget it. Then I went to the next section and I was like, well, it's literally a self-negotiation of what's the lesser evil. And can I find something that's good enough that I feel good about? But yeah, you spoke into going gluten-free. I teach everyone that the top 5 inflammatory foods are sugar, dairy, alcohol, gluten, and meat. And by meat, I mean, if red meat is hard for you to digest, then it's inflammatory to you.
Right.
But we all have different bodies and I can't predict. So I just ask people to test that theory on themselves. But I tell them, look, pescatarian's fantastic. You eat all your seafood and get your omega-3s. If you want to eat poultry too, like whatever is right for your body type. I'm vegetarian, so that decision was kind of made for me as a kid. I was raised veg. And then I went gluten-free. It was a really long road to becoming purely gluten-free.
Isn't it amazing how much gluten is in random things?
Oh, yeah.
Like
I can feel
soy sauce?
Yep.
Like I never would think that there was gluten in soy sauce.
So every Asian restaurant I go to, I love the food, but I always leave feeling like 20% not well because it did have the gluten in there. And you can ask though, nowadays most restaurants have gluten-free soy sauce.
Yes.
But when you give up your gluten food, glutinous flour-based foods, you end up with corn. And so you consume a ton of corn tortillas, corn-based chips, corn everything. Then you switch to almond. And in Ayurveda, I teach you cannot eat almond and nutty foods all summer. It's very heating to the body. So then you have to start making your compromises in all that, you know?
It's such a juggling act.
Yeah.
Like you talked about like making your own things. Like I live on a 5-acre farm.
Yes, I wanted to share about this. I'm so glad you're bringing it up. I found this so endearing about you. I was like, chicks and chickens and eggs. Yes, this is the life we're meant to lead.
Yeah, that's what it makes me want to like. My husband jokes I want to be like a shut-in. I'm like, I just want to like grow food on my property, eat what I grow, and then like stay in our little happy bubble with our horses and the water.
Totally.
But yeah, we haven't built it yet, but we're building a chicken coop this summer.
Awesome.
We have a lot of fruit trees, an avocado tree.
Nice.
And I want to build like a vegetable garden that like every year we'll build it and it'll grow and then that'll be it. So I need to learn how to make it
substantial enough so that it can feed the family.
Yes, and keep going.
Sure, like sustainable.
Sustainable.
Yes.
That's what I was like. What is the word?
Yeah, because you could build it and it would all die. And then
it all grew. Like I had Japanese sweet potatoes. I had jalapenos, peppers, and it all grew really well.
Nice.
And then it died.
Yeah, and you have to start over.
I didn't. You start over.
Yeah, I have a black thumb, so I've given up hope. But I would love for someone to come grow food for me and it's mine and it's organic and then I get to eat it.
I would like that. I want to find someone who wants to like plant things and then like we'll share it. Like there's actually a honey person. Yes. There's a woman that comes around. She saves the bees. We had bees in our tree and she took them out and she sets up like hives on your property and then you share the honey.
That's awesome.
That's going to happen too.
There are people who go out and save the bees like that so instead of you like hacking away the branch and trying to throw it and, harm the bees, which we need to be saving the bees.
Right. She saves them. She's Kim the bee lady. She's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's good to know. I'm glad we're sharing that.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to know those resources.
They're so important. Because I called probably at least 10 people to remove the hive and all of them were like, yeah, we'll try. And she's like, no, 100%. Like the bees will be moved. They're not going to be exterminated.
Of course.
I love you, bee.
Yeah. And I think people don't realize we have no food supply
without them.
And we're having massive collapses of bee colonies in huge catastrophic numbers.
From like pesticides.
Yeah, from pesticides and our behaviors and climate change and all those things. I don't want to be doomsday, but I think about these things a lot.
So do I. That's why I told you.
My
be
whole mind is always like,
food.
how do we save the bees and how do we save the land and how do we get rid of the glyphosate and how do we use less drugs and how do we eat cleaner and how do we build our health? Like,
it can be very overwhelming. You have to do little bits. So you work on yourself.
Yes.
And then you share the knowledge with other people.
Exactly.
That's what I like to do. That's what I do in my office.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. If we can't come from a place of having done it, how can we show others?
Right.
Yeah.
And the nutrition thing is the hardest, especially when you're busy with kids.
Yeah.
That's something I struggle with that I'm working.
Yeah. No, it's true. I take lunch to work every day because if I eat out as a vegetarian who's gluten-free, I'm only going to eat Tijuana Flats or Chipotle. Like that's the easiest and fastest.
I will always be that person to go with you.
Yes. We met at Tijuana Flats once. It's one of my top 10 favorite restaurants because it's easy to eat gluten-free and fresh and fast. So yeah, you have to find those places and then have them readily available. Otherwise, you'll end up going for less healthy options.
Yeah, if it's there, it's you're just going to grab it and go.
Yeah.
But if you can have it ready and prepared, which my husband is amazing. He cooks and has everything in the fridge. So you have to make the decision to grab the good thing and not the protein bar with the palm oil.
Totally. Exactly. So going back to you and your practice, can you share any other fun patient stories of how someone came to you and because of the style that you have with what you do, you were able to support them in a unique way?
Yes. So I told you the CrossFit people. So there's this woman that came in. Most of my patients are like 40, like anywhere from 20 to like 50, and they're all usually very athletic. But I have a couple patients who are in their 60s and 70s. And this one woman, she was like a tough lady. Like you could tell, like there was no messing around with her. And I was like, oh God, she's going to hate me.
Yeah.
So she comes
tough,
in. She was tough. Like, and she came in, I adjusted her. I gave her, Medicare's tough with the way that what you're allowed to bill and things like that. It's a totally different podcast.
Yeah.
So I gave her some tips. I'm like, try this when you're doing things. Big golfer, like she was retired, so she golfed. And I had her just try doing this breathing technique with the bracing and just tell me how you do. 2 days later, she comes in, walks into my adjustment room. She shuts the door behind me. I'm like, oh God.
Yeah.
Here we go.
I'm gonna get a
She
lecture.
like hugged me.
Wow.
And cried. And she's like, I can play golf. I don't have to stop. I can enjoy the time with my friends. And she's like a 75-year-old woman and she's still wanting to play golf. And that, like those patients, I love, like they realize how beneficial it is being active and being social.
Sure.
Like she could have just gone on the couch, took a pill and never did what she enjoyed. Because no matter what, you can take a pill, but you're still going to have the problem and it's still going to come up every time you do it.
True.
Like the pain might be a little less, but you're still going to be miserable. So she now she comes and sees me, like it'll like start to tweak up and she'll be like, oh, doc, I got to come in. She'll get adjusted and go.
Nice.
So she was like my favorite. Like it was such a simple like adjustment of her SI joint, which is the sacrum and the ilium on the bottom and some bracing techniques. And she was good.
That's awesome.
Oh, I loved it. It was my favorite.
That's a big deal. That's actually part of the reason I think I'm so passionate about doctors and medicine is because I've had Fusionary for 7 years. I've met thousands of practitioners and then I've gotten to know hundreds of them pretty well. And these stories are my favorite because you took someone's life and they were about to lose, it's not a livelihood in this case, but in her case, it kind of is her lifeblood. It's what kept her out there. It's what kept her social, kept her moving, what kept her happy and joyful and doing her favorite thing. For some people, it's art. For some people, it's race car driving, which I want to be a race car driver.
Do you really?
Yeah, I love driving fast like a crazy person. I have these quirks. My sister took me to a racetrack once and I was like, I should have been this in my lifetime. But we each have those things that like totally get us going. And so to be able to let someone keep that for another decade or two completely transforms their entire life journey.
Yeah.
You know?
It was great to give that. Like, so she's like one of my favorite patients. I love her.
Yeah.
And then I love the people who the people that are in between, those are the tough ones.
Yeah.
But that's why they call it a practice. Like this technique's not working. I'm like, so I usually give my patients like 2 weeks. I'm like 2 weeks of coming in 2 or 3 times. Yeah. And if that's not working, we're switching it, or I'm referring.
Sure. Or
for imaging to an ortho or whatever. There's no ego involved, because my only goal is to make sure the patient feels better and they're able to do what they want to do.
Sure.
So that's one thing that's probably a downside for me, is when I can't get them better. It doesn't happen all the time, but it weighs on my heart. Yeah. I want them to live a better life than what they did when they came in to see me.
No, it's true. It's true. I do Ayurveda consultations, and I get so in it with them. Like, I get the full history, then I tell them their dosha, and then I'm trying to help them. I'm trying to get to the root cause and align to it so my intuition can give me the solutions. And sometimes I tell them at the end, I'm like, just so you know, you're going to be part of my aura. Like, you're going to be part of my field until I can solve it.
Dosha is the word of the day. My office manager was like telling everybody what their dosha was today.
Really?
Yeah. I forgot what she said. I don't know.
You're definitely a partial kapha.
And I think that's what she said.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like, you're very loving. You feel like Mother Earth.
Oh, is that what the way? Yeah.
Yeah. Which is more kapha.
Oh, I have to get into that. I love that.
Yeah. So whenever I do the consultations, they become part of you. And so then it's hard to let them go until you've solved it.
Right.
But I think if you're great at referring and you understand all the cool practitioners around you, then you've got resources. Then you're like, hey, I might not be your solution. I've got someone though who's perfect for you.
100%. I even have other doctors in my office that are like that, which is really nice. I have like one doctor, she does a technique where it's like all emotional. Wow. And that's not me at all. I'm more like sports and like physical, like I can do soft tissue work, I'll do the exercises. Sure. But she'll address, there is an emotional component to pain. It's buried in your brain. It's hard to get away from that. When I tell patients that, some of them are like, oh yeah, and other people are like, you're telling me my pain's in my head? I'm like, no, not at all. But like the way your brain perceives it affects your whole body. It can cause more pain and discomfort.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's a whole different level of healing and understanding that people are kind of hearing about more, which is good. Mm-hmm. I had a very bad car accident when my daughter Anya was 1, and it was in my neighborhood. And I'm so glad I don't live in that part of the neighborhood. But now my son goes to soccer. And so 90% of the time I drive around. Like, I'll take federal highway to avoid going through that intersection. And sometimes I'll go through it and I can tell I'm not present. Like, I'm checking out of myself as I'm going through. And I'm like, Shivani, of all the places to be real present, if the light's red or green and who's coming from what direction, now would be that moment. But you're right. Like, we have these seated emotions and traumas from our past, and then pain can manifest.
Yeah, it can definitely manifest.
So what else have you seen when it comes to people's pain, their inflammation? Can you talk into just like educating on what are the different ways pain is held in the body? And then some of those approaches, because even the emotional one, most people might not have even thought of that.
I learned recently, I had a patient who had a really strong reaction to manual therapy, which is massage. And I did some research because the pressure wasn't hard or anything like that, but I've learned that trauma can store in your fascia. So like releasing that can cause this like huge wave of emotion. I had that like myself a couple times after my accident, where I felt like very overwhelmed and like brought to tears after getting work done. But that was really interesting. But more things, the evidence informed person of me, that's the other side. But how I treat patients is like pain can manifest in the weirdest ways, especially in the soft tissue. So people with nerve pain, they'll have like what appears to be carpal tunnel. But I'll do a full examination, and it's actually not even carpal tunnel, which if you go to a surgeon, most likely you're going to get carpal tunnel surgery because you're presenting that way. Sure. But if they didn't do a full exam and feel your neck, like I did have a patient, I adjusted her neck a handful of times at this point and really got her cervical thoracic junction moving. She has no more, the numbness in her hand is almost gone.
Wow.
Because it can manifest in different ways.
So it's stemming from an entirely different place.
Entirely different place.
I've seen that. Like when I irritate my elbow, I give myself golfer's or tennis elbow when I lift too heavy sometimes. My massage therapist who does medical massage, he'll go deep in the shoulder, neck, and back.
And it'll probably relieve your...
Done.
Right. It's amazing. It's important. Most of the time, the pain is at the source. But when it's like that weird nerve pain, like it's always important to look elsewhere. Like a big thing I do with nerve pain is nerve flossing. which is awesome. It's you give the patient exercise where they're actually like flossing their nerve through their fascia.
Wow.
And it breaks up those adhesions that can cause like a pulling sensation.
Wow.
And think about it, every time you breathe, your heart beats, like your nerves will move a little bit.
Sure.
And you'll get that zingy sensation. It's uncomfortable.
I've never heard of nerve flossing.
No?
No, never.
Oh, it's
new word.
Great. Yeah. So like you could do it if you ever have that pain. So the reason why when your massage therapist works in here, so what they're doing is they're working the fascia here, and you can have nerve entrapment here. So you like extend your arm and your head. It's very gentle. Yeah. And then you could feel the pull.
And you go again and again.
Yes. And then as you do it.
He does that in the session actually on me.
So he nerve flosses you.
A lot actually.
Yeah. And then like this will be better. And then you do this part. Right. And then you do the elbow. Right. And then you do the wrist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. And nerve flossing is amazing. I had a good story on that actually. This woman, she works with her hands. She's a house cleaner. She couldn't lift her arm. At all. And she was like, would have tears in her eyes. She came in twice. I don't even think I adjusted that patient. I just did soft tissue work. I did some nerve flossing. And then she like had tears in her eyes when I retested it, 'cause she was able to lift her arm up with no pain.
Wow.
So like that woman got her livelihood back. Like she wasn't able to work, support her family. So that was amazing. Yeah. I almost forgot about her.
Yeah, no, it's a big deal. And then can you speak a little bit into aging? Like the other day I was in the gym and I commented to PC, who I work out with sometimes. I'm like, PC, how can it be that, you know, like we get these tweaks? And I was like, everyone around me, I'm in my early 40s. Everyone around me keeps commenting on aging. And it's to the point where now it comes into my mind and I've resisted thus far. But is it aging that we like get the tweaks in our knee and tweaks in our hip and our shoulder gets irritated? That as we're working out, it's aging? Or in your opinion, is it like the mobility, hydration, nutrition?
I would definitely say it's the second part. It's definitely the mobility, hydration. It's that book I was telling you I was reading, like what you're eating is rotting your body away. So like over time, like you're slowly eating away at things. And like you mentioned, like accumulation. So I think a lot of it, it's not an age, maybe an aging thing as we're getting older and we're just like tired of making the effort. So I think it's more of like you lose the time to work on your mobility, your hydration. Like you talked about seasons. Yeah. So like when you're younger, you're like, oh, I'm going to be like super fit and hydrate. And then now like you get older and you're like, well, I also have kids and a mortgage and a house and whatever.
All the serious
things that you don't spend the time to do the mobility and put yourself first, which you have to put yourself. I tell patients all the time that like you have to, it sounds selfish, but you have to put yourself first. You can't, what's the word? You can't pour from an empty cup.
Right. And self-care is key.
It is. It's not being selfish. It's you taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
I have this one patient, this lady, but she's in her 70s and she's the caregiver for her husband who outweighs her by minimally 80 pounds.
Wow.
So it's like, you have to take care of yourself. If
sure.
you're going to take care of him, like you have to take care of yourself. And right now you're not doing that. You're just focusing on him. Right. Which is such a heartbreaking situation.
Yeah. And if you think about that, that probably happened a lot in the pandemic. It happens a lot to women as we age because our parents are aging and who's more likely to step up and out of their career or their life to go handle the parents. It's usually the woman. Yeah. And so, yeah, I've seen that a lot, that we dive into like our Mother Earth nature of like caregiver, caretaker, and put everyone else first but ourselves. And then you have to find yourself again. And I have seen that a lot. A lot of women come to me and they're like, I just don't feel right. And I'm like, let's just take it a layer at a time. But what I discover is everyone else was first their whole life. So of course now, 10, 20 years later,
your body tells you enough is enough.
Exactly. You're depleted. You're tired. You've got brain fog. Hormones are off. Gut health is definitely off. Just living in America, taking the antibiotics we take and eating what we eat. And then sleep is off. And then it all packs on.
It does. It layers down. Every time I say that, I think of like when my daughter used to watch Shrek when she was little. You're like, I'm an onion.
It's true.
It is. It's layer after layer of layer just piles up.
It does.
It's hard. It's a hard thing. So like I feel like when I tell patients this, they're like, oh, it's all about my diet. I'm like, you're with me for like maybe 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Like you're out in the world for 23. I'm like, so it's all based on those micro traumas, the way you're sitting,
Yeah.
your diet, it's all adding up.
Sure.
So like you're doing the right thing coming in and seeing, or trying to fix the problem, but you have to participate in it.
True.
You have to look at what you're eating. You have to look at your workstation, how you're lifting at the gym. If you're going in and like you haven't worked out in a while and you're like, oh, I can go back to doing that 200-pound deadlift. Like, that's not, your body's going to tell you that's not a great idea. And unfortunately, your body communicates via pain.
Yeah. And then speaking into the positive of the onion layers, I think in the same way that we can pile on these layers that are not good for us, we can also peel back that onion. And by going to integrative practitioners like you, we can one by one say, okay, well, I'm going to put mobility first. I'm going to put breathing first. I'm going to put, using my deep muscles instead of relying on just whatever to get me through. Like layer by layer, I'm seeing that people are investing in their health. They're investing in biohacking. I work out with women at my gym who are easily 2 to 3 decades older than me, and they're beasts. They lift so heavy. I deeply admire all of them. They usually kick the lighter weights towards me. They're like, that's yours. I'm like, I know. Thank you. You take that weird heavy one. So it's great because, people are, I find now understanding that if they don't put their health first, there is a price. And sometimes it takes the wake up call of going to a practitioner and saying, hey, what am I doing wrong? And then they can turn that around. I think
like we talked about the cumulative of the bad, but it's also cumulative of the good. Like I'm avoid gluten 90% of the time. Right. But like if I have it those other times, it's not as bad as it was before.
Correct.
And like if occasionally you want to go out to dinner or have chips or whatever, but you're good 90, 80% of the time.
Exactly.
It's so much better. Like you can enjoy that without like the guilt and the pressure.
True. And I try to be so real with people. I'm like, look, I drink Chardonnay. I have nachos. I love my penne alla vodka gluten-free. Like there's certain foods I love. And I believe in having that joy. We can have joy with food. We can have joy with self-care. We can have joy with exercise. But what I have done is I've crowded out my life with 80 to 90% of what I love being so good for me and replenishing that 10, 20% of fun that might inflame my body, like you just said, doesn't have such a big toll.
100%.
Yeah.
Porters, beer porter.
Yeah.
That's my jam.
Yeah. Yeah. So
but you can't have it all the time, but every once in a while it's nice and you can enjoy the taste of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's okay. And even, I found recently, I was at a chiropractic conference in Orlando and I met a company that has an enzyme that helps you digest gluten. And so I bought it because I was curious. And the other day I bought sourdough bread and there's this theory amongst gluten-free people. Let me dispel it for you now.
Yeah.
As a pure gluten-free person, that sourdough bread was not gluten-free friendly to me at all. But I bought it from Sprouts. I baked it. It was golden brown. I cut it on the wood cutting board. And I was like, this is that
great
moment.
Crunchy sound.
Yeah. I was like, maybe God loves me and I'm going to get to eat this thing for life. I can't wait. And I take a bite and I'm like, oh, so far, so good. I eat the slice. And then, of course, like a ravenous addict, I'm like breaking off pieces, eating it in butter. And all of a sudden I was like, oh no. And I could just feel pain. Like my stomach was irritated. And I feel like almost like what's like joint pain. Like my whole body just starts to hurt. And I'm like,
same. I feel like I have a flu.
Yeah. All of a sudden it's a severe reaction. And soon after I get very sleepy. But I was like, I wonder if that product, if I can find it. So I found the bottle, I popped 2 of the enzyme, and within 20 minutes, that whole feeling settled down.
Okay.
And so my friend took it and was like, this is the get out of jail free card. And I was like, no. That's called an emergency parachute, only to be used when necessary. It's not a crutch for daily use. We can poison and take the antidote every single day. It was so funny. My mind doesn't go in that direction, but hers did. And I was like, wow, okay. No, but it was.
Share that product with me.
I will. It was a good one to have. So I bought another one from another competitor and I'm going to test that one because I always like to know which
I've had one, but I also was super inflamed when it was happening and I had it, I forgot what holiday it was, but it didn't do anything for me. But now that I'm feeling better and I don't have the numbness, I'm thinking about trying it to see if I get that feeling again.
Because it helps. I eat, somehow I guess my friends and family have understood my gluten message. Many of them are gluten-free. And sometimes when we go out to eat, inevitably a sauce will have gluten and you can tell halfway through dinner, they're just ill and they're dealing with it. And we're going to get through dinner. And it's a nice place far away, but all of a sudden it kind of ruins the dinner.
Yeah.
So I'd love for those of us who are gluten-free just to have 2 in a Ziploc in our bag as like our emergency stash to settle that feeling, because not every restaurant is very gluten-friendly.
No, not at all.
So then at least you have options. Yeah. All right. Awesome.
I like it.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with us today? Because I feel like I could talk to you all day long.
I know.
About so many topics, which is so fun. But is there anything else you'd like to share? I know you mentioned cupping, and I was talking about cupping right when we were walking in, because I have cupping and bruising. So I'm wearing long sleeves today so I don't look funny. But cupping and those kinds of things, will you share some of those things you do? Because it's important to know, if you are more athletic and these things, all those resources you have available to you, that it's not just adjusting.
Right. It's definitely not all adjusting, because you can have pain from your joints, you can have pain from your nerves, your muscles, or your disc. So if it's your joint, you need to be adjusted, period. Your disc, you most likely need anti-inflammatory protocol, and you need to do exercise. And if it's your nerve, the nerve flossing, like we talked about earlier. But if it's your soft tissue and that's where the pain is coming from, then like cupping is great. It kind of separates the layers. And then the soft tissue tool, I use this blade called a rock blade, and it kind of tells the brain, like, calm down in this area, like it's okay. But the biggest thing is everything needs to be paired with some kind of motion.
Sure.
Like if a patient comes in, gets treatment with me, and then goes for a walk for 10 minutes outside, or like does 5 squats, or just does normal breathing, like good breathing patterns using their diaphragm, like that will hold so much better.
Wow.
So I think the biggest takeaway is that you should always pair everything with motion.
That's a big deal.
It's huge. But you need to move. You don't live in a bubble. You don't live laying flat on my table.
Sure.
You live moving around, picking up your kids, groceries, cleaning your house, getting dressed in the morning.
Sure.
Like, you need to move to do all those things. So it's important that you pair your therapy with that.
So you want people to move soon after an appointment?
Oh, yeah.
Most of us go, like, I would get adjusted, sit at my car for a while, drive to my office, and then sit at my desk.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's real life, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But if they can, you can go for a walk for 5 minutes, or usually if you come to my office, you'll get adjusted, and then you'll do exercise.
Okay. So you're getting it right then.
You're getting it right then. I'm most likely doing some kind of DNS protocol with you. Okay. Or if I do cupping with you, I'll put the cups, say if it was you, I'd put your cups on your neck and your shoulder, and then we do some neck exercises or some shoulder, all very gentle, but like you're moving with it. Right. So it's just important that you pair movement with therapy.
Nice. That's a big message.
It's great.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. That's unusual. Most people have not even heard that one. In that's what's so exciting about the podcast, is I get to learn so much from you guys. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. This was a great experience.
Nice. I'm glad. So thank you everyone for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. FusionaryFormulas.com is the website. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts, click the follow button, or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health Podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.